and by figure. You pay attention with so much at stake.
Seas are rising and chronic flooding will be the new normal.
You navigate, you listen, you keep an ear out. You pay attention, and so do we. We tell the stories of our time every day.
In the 26th day of testimony and on the 139th witness, Shahar Tsarnaev wept.
We unearth what would otherwise stay hidden.
There's just a lot of hate in this world, and that day, for that hour, we were humans.
Across the street.
The Red Sox have won the World Series.
And around the globe.
It's here and now.
This is modern love.
This is WBUR's All Things Considered.
This is only a game.
This is On Point.
This is Radio Boston.
On air, online, on demand, and on stage in the heart of Boston.
I'm Jack Lepiars. Welcome to WBUR City Space.
Always looking forward, paying attention, and knowing that your story is one of our stories.
Good morning. I'm Bob Oates.
I'm Lisa Mullins.
I'm Meghna Chakrabarty.
I'm Jeremy Hobson.
This is 90.9 WBUR Boston.
Hello, welcome. My name's Amy McDonald. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at WBUR, and I'm also programming this space. How many are you here for the first time? A lot of you. Welcome. Come back. I like to call City Space the 92nd Street Y of Boston. Go to our website, wbur.org/cityspace. We've been open just over 2 months now, and we've done about 70 events. We've done everything from policy discussions to author interviews to a dance performance to a coffee house opera to live podcasts to Moth Story Slam to comedians to Margaret Atwood on Saturdays. So there's something for everyone. So do check it out. Come back. Isn't it a gorgeous space? Isn't this wonderful? And it's such a streetscape. And what we hear today, too, you can hear outside. So I love it when there's music playing or dance or they see a name and everyone stops and then they sit on the benches and they start taking pictures. So it's really, this space is for you. We're so happy to have this panel tonight on the future of work. A little note about the Q&A. We are using something called Slido. If you go to your phones and just press in slido.com, and then there will be a password, which is FW506. You just put that into your phone, and you can ask questions on your cell phone during the conversation. And then at the end, I'll send them to Gerald Chertavian, our moderator, and they'll be on the screen. If anyone would prefer to ask a live question, just raise your hand, and I'll give you the mic. Please welcome our panelists to the stage, Gerald Chertavian, Professor Ton, and President Aoun.
Fantastic. Good evening to you all. It is so nice to be here with you today, and what a gem for Boston to have this space. So Amy, thank you to you and WBUR for giving our city another cultural place for us to gather and have good dialogue. My name is Gerald Chertavian. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called Year Up. We have any Year Up friends out there? Great. I like that. In a nutshell, we work as a program with low-income 18 to 24-year-olds from all around the country, and in 1 year, enable those young adults to go from either low-income or no-income to a livable wage job, largely in technology or finance, averaging about $40,000 per year as a start point. And we've served 25,000 young people across the country, and we are blessed to have the best young people in this country coming to Year Up who need opportunity to realize their God-given potential. And I'm super excited today to be joined by two friends I have a lot of respect for, President Joseph Aoun from Northeastern and Professor Zeynep Ton from MIT. I'm just going to introduce him for a minute. President Aoun has been the president for 13 years. I consider him one of the most important people in education today, literally. If you had to pick a few people in the country, he literally is one of the people to pay attention to, and I'll tell you why. Not just because Northeastern has now risen, as many of you have seen, to be one of the preeminent institutions globally 62,000 applications just this year, but also because he has a vision for a global university system in experiential education, which is where we need to head writ large with our education. So he's done just such a tremendous job. We have 6 campuses. You can do co-ops in 136 countries. Can you believe that? 136 countries across the world. Now, if you go to Northeastern, and I have huge, huge respect for you, President, of what you've done for our country and certainly our globe educationally. So it's a total pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. You usually call me Joseph, so we want to stay with President?
And I like Joseph.
Okay.
Yeah, I like Joseph.
Okay.
And full disclosure, I tend to be someone who gives everyone nicknames, and that's not a great thing, but I do. So I did say Joe once, and I could see the kind of pained look on everyone who works with Joseph's face. No. You actually don't call him Joe as Joseph. Now, Zeynep Ton. Zeynep is a professor at MIT. She spent 15 years researching how do you help employers to be much better employers, especially when you look at the retail sector, right? You're talking about, 35 million Americans, 1 out of 3 people start their first job in this country in the retail sector. And there's a great difference in how people treat their employees. So it's really, really interesting. She spent several years at Harvard Business School, then at MIT. In both schools, she's been rated one of the most excellent teachers, kind of teacher excellence. She's been recognized for that, both in the classroom. She wrote a book, which she has here, which is one of the best books I've read, called The Good Job Strategy. And because it was so successful, all these companies called her and said, help us. We want to be better employers. We believe there's value in what you're doing. And so she started a whole institute called the Good Jobs Institute to help employers actually do something which we believe is important to do, which is actually provide people with much better livings, wages, benefits, career ladders in this country. So I'm honored to be with both of you. The framing for this evening, kind of what we'll talk about, you all read the papers like I do. And the fact is you read a lot of scary things, as I do. 40% of jobs are going to get disrupted by technology, automation, robotics. You certainly also paid a tuition bill probably, or tried to in your lives, and the cost of education is going up. In fact, the only cost that's gone up more than healthcare in this country is education, right? And getting an education and getting skilled is increasingly important rather than not. So you have rising costs of education. You have the specter of automation coming. We certainly have seen some of the highest levels of inequality in this country since going back to the 20s. And I think there's a lot of Americans who look out and say, where am I in this economy? And how do I get ahead in this economy, whether I'm 18 or frankly, whether I'm 48, because the jobs and the roles are changing pretty quickly. And so having listened to a lot of folks on this topic, I've heard some people paint it as a great opportunity. I've heard people say it's a massive threat. You have presidential candidates running on the platform of universal basic income, which basically says a whole bunch of Americans are going to be left out. We need to just pay everyone income, even if they don't do anything, right? That's a reaction of a policy to a prognostication of where we're going in this country, which I would not adhere to, but it's pretty scary to think about. So it can be scary, it can be opportunistic. If you're sitting in the audience today listening, and Joseph, if you're talking to the audience individuals, should people be scared? Should they be excited? How do you frame and think about what's going to happen and how they adapt?
All the above, first of all.
All the above.
We should all be scared and excited at the same time. Right. Because whenever there is change, we're all a little bit worried about it. And also at the same time, there are enormous opportunities. So you mentioned that, in fact, up to 50% of the jobs, according to certain economists, and people will tell you, no, it's not 50, it's 40, 30% of the jobs will disappear in the next 20 years. What is sure is that jobs are going to change, and some will disappear. We also know that there will be new jobs being created as we speak, and new jobs going forward. We don't know whether the jobs that are replacing the disappearing jobs will be enough. But therefore, the question is, how are we going to face this situation? And essentially, if you look at it over its history, every time there is a change, society looked at the change and said, okay, we're moving from the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution. We need new talent. And, and therefore, that's where you saw land-grant universities being created. You saw schools of engineering and management, etc. Similarly, at some point, we moved from the industrial to the, IT revolution and the IT world, and people said, now we need computer science, now we need X, Y, and Z. Now we are living in a new world, the world of AI. And with this new world of AI, it is going to be a very different world for us humans, because the implications is that we are constantly going to have to redefine ourselves. I remember when I went to school, or I think when you went to school, people told you if you go to college, you're set for life. It's no longer true. Now we have to, in order to become really robot-proof, and that's the title of a book I wrote on this subject, we need to be in a lifelong learning mode. Let me start with that, which means that now, if you look in the United States, already 74% of the learners are non-traditional learners. Namely that the 18 to 22 that colleges and universities focus on are a minority. It's a very important minority. But the demand is there, and we all need to retool, re-educate ourselves, reskill ourselves, and upskill ourselves. What worries me about that is that universities have not integrated lifelong learning as part of their core mission. Actually, as a matter of fact, we look at our mission as doing two things: educating the 18 to 22, and at the same time doing research and educating PhD students. And then universities look at lifelong learning as a second-class operation. So look at it. You have an enormous demand. The demand is not met yet. And that's what worries me. Higher education risks becoming, and I use this metaphor, very much like the railway industry in the United States. When it saw the onset of the airline revolution, they said, oh, that's not my revolution. That doesn't impact me. Why? Because they defined themselves as being in the railway business, not in the transportation business. And higher education is facing the same situation. We are not in the education, our mission is not to educate 18 to 22, but to educate people for life. And that's where the revolution has to take place. In order to become robot-proof, we all need to re-educate ourselves. It doesn't mean going to school, going back to college. You don't have the time. You don't have the opportunities, and sometimes you don't have the means, as you said. Therefore, the university has to come to you, and I'll discuss it later. Mm-hmm. So we will have the opportunity to discuss it later. Yes, let's be worried about that. At the same time, let's be excited, and be happy later to talk about universal basic income and other aspects of that, and why it's occurring, and will it be enough?
Fantastic.
May I touch on something that Joseph just mentioned? And first of all, it's an honor to be with the two of you on the stage and to be in this beautiful, beautiful place. So thank you for inviting me. You mentioned jobs changing versus disappearing.
Both.
And sometimes I think we get so nervous, so scared, and we forget what is changing and what's disappearing. So what is a job? The job is a combination of lots of different tasks. Right? And some of those tasks are very open to being taken out by AI or automation, the routine physical work, or processing, analyzing data. These are the types of things that are very prone to automation. But there are also lots of other tasks that humans are great at. Managing people, solving problems, developing deep expertise, etc. So when we think about a job, some tasks might be taken out, but other aspects of the job might stay. One of the examples that's often given is what's going to happen to all the truck drivers, right? There are so many truck drivers in the United States, and with autonomous cars, what will happen to truck drivers? And interestingly, every retail CEO that I talk to say, I can't find enough truck drivers. Like, I just wish there were more of them. But think about what a truck driver do. And if you ever ridden a truck with a Frito-Lay driver or with somebody else, and I'm an operations professor, so I talk about these boring logistics things. But a truck driver does not just take the truck from point A to point B. They load, they unload, they develop relationships, they care about on-time delivery, and they solve problems when things go wrong. So there are lots of things that the truck driver does that will stay in that job. The driving part could be automated now. So we have to think about what kind of skills do we need our truck drivers to have in this new environment, and what kind of retooling do they require?
If I may, I completely agree with Zeynep. Zeynep, it's great to be with you. Okay, and
not me.
With you, depends on. By the end of the evening, we're friends, so we can play. Look, it is clear that when you look at jobs, some jobs are going to disappear. But let me look at it and some jobs are going to be created. What is the purpose and what's the mission of education? The mission of education is to help people become robot-proof. And it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey. And in order to become robot-proof, let me start with something. In robot-proof, we put on the table something called humanics, saying that every person graduating from college today has to master humanics. And what is humanics? Humanics is the understanding and the integration of three literacies. One is the tech literacy, understanding machines and how to interact with machines. Second, understanding data literacy, how to navigate the sea of information generated by these machines. And third is the human literacy. And what is the human literacy is what we humans do that machines cannot duplicate. And it's the ability to be creative, to be innovative, to be entrepreneurial, to look people in the eye, understand their body language, to work in team, to be culturally agile, to be global, etc., etc. Once again, from this perspective, and when we survey employers, and every year we survey employers nationwide, and this year we're doing it in Canada and in the UK also, we see that employers are not interested in people with a skill only. They are interested in people who are able to go beyond, going back to, and who have the human literacy, who can work with other people, because they look at those people as an investment. I'm investing in my team, and I want my team to go forward. So if you look at the status of higher education now, for us, the higher education is very siloed. We are not integrating the three literacies. And in fact, that's why we are seeing now many of the liberal arts colleges in trouble. And that's not a good thing. Because we look at them and we say, okay, they are doing some aspects of the human literacy. And those people over there are doing some aspects of the skills, of the technology, of the tech. It's the integration that counts. So to illustrate that with employers, you all heard that there are boot camps where you can go and learn coding, correct? When they started, everybody jumped at that. Employers were in need of this. And now employers are telling us we're not hiring people out of a boot camp. And we say, why? They said because they can start, they cannot move forward. And that's the story. So higher education has a role to play, is to help people become robot-proof. Humanics, and humanics is the integration of the three literacies. I'll come next afterwards to look at how you achieve that. How can you get people to have this human literacy? But since we agreed that we are going to ask each other questions, okay?
Yes,
tell us about the Year Up model. You have many students who are from Year Up, many members of your organization. We have members of our organizations here. And tell us, how do you approach precisely helping people become, to start, to help, to launch them in their journey.
When you're talking, I was thinking that more than half of what we do at Year Up is what I call the ABCs, or the new ABCs, which are attitudinal, behavioral, and communication skills that are kind of the bedrock of that human literacy of what are the attitudes of working in teams or the behaviors of working in teams. How do I communicate well with someone? What are the behaviors of someone who's professional, reliable, proactive? How do you inculcate that in someone? And I would say that the hard skills, which we always say hard and soft skills is such a misnomer. We should say hard and harder skills, because the human skills are actually harder. Having a good EQ and knowing how to work well with people is actually quite difficult. Teaching the technical skills has never been the gating factor at Year Up in the last 20 years and 25,000 young people. And I can promise you, we've worked with 400 employers from Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. Not once have they come back and said, gee, your student can't do the technical work. They have come back at times to say we need to work on communication skills or behavioral aspects, but it's not the technology. So I think if we could just get people to learn how to learn and to love learning in and of itself, that's robot-proof, right? Because you have to be an active learner. And so 50% of what we do is more based on those ABCs in preparing young people to be professionals, to go into the work environment confident, to know that, yes, they may not have had all of these opportunities that someone else has, but last time I checked, God didn't distribute intelligence by zip code or bank balance. But unfortunately, opportunity gets meted out in this country in pretty harsh ways, depending on where you live and who you are. And so we've figured that out, that there's this great pool of talent that's been totally untapped, and employers are dying to find access to that, which is why this year Bank of America alone will take 400 of our students and probably hire 300 plus into full-time jobs that you can actually start to take care of yourself and your family with, which is a blessing.
Can I be a little bit, egg you a little bit on here? You didn't cover everything you do at Year Up.
Tell me.
You see, look, the theme that I'm pushing for is the ability to become robot-proof. And in order to be robot-proof, think about understanding machines and then focus beyond that on doing what humans do that machines cannot duplicate. That's a human literacy. But then how do you acquire the human literacy? What I like about Year Up is that Year Up does something that we do at Northeastern, namely the experiential.
Yeah.
What is the experiential? It's those long-term internships. And why is it relevant? Because I can give you books to read about innovation, about creativity, about teamwork, and you can become, the specialist of that. It doesn't make you a person who is empathetic to people, know how to work with people, be innovative. You have to live it. And by living it, you learn about yourself, what you're good at, what you're not good at. Those are the internships. You also learn how to interact with people. You see gaps. This NGO, this company, this not-for-profit are not doing what they should be doing. I can go launch it. You learn how to be culturally agile and work with people from different horizons. But more importantly, what is experiential education? It's the integration of the world experience with the classroom experience. That's what we do. That's what you do. Now, if you look at it, machines are not good at transferring their expertise from a domain to another, to another, to another. We know how to navigate the infinity of domains and use our knowledge and refine it and re-question it and reshape it. That's what machines cannot do. So once again, the theme is very simple. To be robot-proof, understand machine, understand AI, by go beyond, focus on what we do that humans cannot do. And that's the ability to, as we said, to be in a social environment, a human environment. That's what you mentioned also, Zeynep. So that's why I give you a B+ on how you describe Year Up.
I love it. Someday I'm going to get an A in Professor Aoun's class.
But you all know that he launched it, that he is the shaper, he is the creator. So that's, what did he do? He used his creativity with respect to that. So I was joking to wake you up because we don't want you to sleep, but the credit goes to him.
So think about, Zeynep, you have, I want you to tell a story a little bit about what happened today, what you tell me about Costco, because it's really interesting in thinking about what employers, because look, you have a role in this, right? As individuals, how are you going to keep yourself employable? How are you going to keep learning? Whether we're, again, 18 or 58, 68, this is a new normal. But employers have a role, right? Those who create jobs. So tell us a little more about how you think about that and a little bit about your day today, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Today was the highlight of my students for the semester because we had the founder of Costco, co-founder of Costco, to visit our stores. And he came with, he came and also a meat manager from one of the stores and a warehouse manager from one of the stores came. And I'll give you a couple of things. And you mentioned find those companies who are humanistic, who invest in their people. I think Costco was a beautiful demonstration of a company that does that. And by the way, this is one of the world's largest retailers. They sell more than $100 billion. They have over 225,000 people. The average wage of a Costco employee at the stores is over $22 an hour. The median wage in retail in 2017 was $10.90 an hour. So they paid double the industry average. They offer the lowest prices to their customers. They have gained the trust of their customers, and they have done fantastic for their shareholders. So Jim comes to class, and after class, I'll mention two different things. One about what humans can do so much better than machines, and also what happens. So this company not only takes care of its employees, but also their customers. And those of you who are looking for jobs, who are looking for where should I take my talents and my skills, I will say, go find those companies that take care of both their employees and their customers. Because if you just do the employee part, and you're not delivering great value for the customers, then you might not stay around for a long time. So that both of them has to be true. So we go to a warehouse after class, and customers stop Jim. Jim Senegal is the name of the co-founder. They hug him. One of them says, "You changed my family's life," and he just walked away. He was an older gentleman. Customers want to take pictures with him. Employees want to take pictures with him. And this guy doesn't even run the company anymore. He's retired. He just retired from the board as well. But there are employees who come to him who cry and say, "Costco changed my life." So that's the perspective from the employee side. You mentioned you move forward. So this is an organization that promotes 100% internally. So you cannot be a warehouse manager if you did not start as a cashier or as a department employee. You have to move up. 100% of their store managers inside the United States are promoted from within. But when these managers come and speak, you feel like they're not working for a company. They own that business. This meat manager, Todd Miner, who came to class, and he was telling my students after class his meat area, and he talked about his own business, how much he sells, what the shrink is in each department, what he's doing to increase sales, what he's doing to take care of his people. But you feel ownership, you feel pride, and you feel ownership. And those are beautiful things to have. Every day he goes to work thinking that he's making a difference. He's making a difference for his customers. He's making a difference for the people who are working for him. He has those skills that machines don't have. He knows everything about his people. He thinks about creative ways to display his merchandise. He was telling my students, I change the displays all the time, and here I put all these things in the end cap, and I can pay for my payroll just through the sales from my end cap. So he's doing all those things.
Do you think the executives at Stop and Shop are getting hugged right now?
Yeah.
Don't get me started on Stop and Shop. I mean, that's the, it's interesting because at Good Jobs Institute, we are a nonprofit, and we talk about companies that we would like to work with. And I'm not sure if I would put.
But I think that here, this is a great story. It's a great example. And also you gave the counterexample. But if you look at what you asked me is what should we be concerned? We all are becoming obsolete by definition. And therefore why? Because of AI and what's happening. So we all need to re-educate ourselves, reskill ourselves, and retool ourselves. So look at it from the point of view of you as a citizen. We surveyed the citizens last year with Gallup, and we asked who should be responsible for that. And the answer said, my employer should be responsible for that. And we said, fine. Then we started looking at whether employers are really helping their employees re-educate themselves, reskill, and upskill. And the answer is going down in the United States. Why? Because the average tenure of an employee is becoming less than 5 years. In Silicon Valley, you know how many years it is? 2. Therefore, what is worrisome is that employers, and that's the definition of good employer, going back to your point, are saying to themselves, it's much easier for me to recruit a different person because those people are becoming obsolete. That's a problem. So how do we, in addition, look at the people in the gig economy, the self-employed. They don't have employers. So we are now in a situation where everybody needs lifelong learning. And society is not geared, and not only universities, but society is not geared to providing that.
Yes, but it's not just that, Joseph, because
the sectors that I...
No, but can I just mention one thing about the tenure of employees? So I look at sectors like retail, assisted living. These are low-wage jobs, and the employee turnover, it's not, the tenure is not 2 years or 5 years, it's a few months.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's not because employees are becoming obsolete. That's not the problem at all. The reason that turnover is so high in these industries is because they provide poverty-level wages. They provide almost no benefits. They provide your schedules 1 or 2 weeks in advance, and they change the schedule in the last minute, so you cannot have a sane life and take care of your family. They provide no opportunities for success. They don't give you the right tools, the right resources to be able to do a good job and thrive in front of the customer. And there are no opportunities to move up in the organization. So it's not that workers are becoming obsolete. It's just the bad jobs are so bad.
What you are describing, I couldn't agree more with you. But it is the case also that, we surveyed employers, and they told us half of our workforce now is obsolete, and we don't know what to do because we don't have the will to invest in re-education, etc. So what you are describing, I fully see and subscribe to, but I see also the others. Therefore, we have an issue as a society. How could we look at it? Well, we have to go on a global scale and look at other countries, what they have done. For instance, in Singapore and the Scandinavian countries, they said every employee, every person in society, every citizen has a lifelong learning account, similar to your health account that we have in Massachusetts. And therefore, you can use it, whether you have an employer or not, that will allow you to re-educate yourself. In the UK now, for instance, they are mandating, passing this law to mandate every employer to put aside 0.5 percentage point of the payroll to help the employees re-educate themselves. So what you are describing, we see it. Yeah. We see it. I have a friend who is in assisted living. I see the frustration, but I see also the other frustration. Yep. And therefore, we as a society are entering into a new world, and we have to prepare to meet the needs of the citizens, whether it's an educational institution or whether it's from a policy perspective. And employers by themselves are not going to be the answer.
So as a professor who teaches by the case method, now I'm going to pull our things together. So there are two types of worlds in the business out there. One that will be significantly affected by AI, by technologies. In that part of the world, we need exactly what you're talking about. And then there's another part of the world, which is the low-wage jobs type of world, where technologies will change in those two. I mean, everything changes, right? In my world of retail, there have been so many new technologies during the last, there are always new technologies. But in that world, the fundamental problem, the fundamental threat is that we need companies to design better jobs and to take care of their workers.
I couldn't agree more with you.
What are you seeing? I'm curious. What are you seeing? Because you work with how many companies?
3,000.
So 3,000 companies
worldwide, and NGOs too.
Right. And so Zeynep's work has looked a lot at the retail sector, kind of at the more entry level, and how to create that.
But you see, Gerald, sorry, I don't want. People see the retail jobs as entry-level jobs, but last year there were 8.7 million people who had these jobs. We can't just see them as entry-level jobs. People at Costco have careers. Right. They don't have jobs. So
fair
sorry,
point.
that's the...
No, fair point. What I was thinking about is, I was trying to compare the employers that you tend to work with. How are they viewing this? How are they viewing their responsibility? Because they work with the Northeastern or Europe, are they starting to change how they think about accessing talent? So I can see from Europe's perspective, we have companies who say, you know what, we used to require a 4-year degree, and we realized we're doing ourselves a disservice by having way too many jobs require a 4-year degree that don't need one. In fact, JP Morgan last year, 75% of the jobs they hired people for didn't need a 4-year degree. In JP Morgan, interesting statistic. Yet, many, many companies over-credential, right? And it's an interesting fact. When you say you need a 4-year degree to apply, you've just excluded 86% of Latinos and 79% of African Americans in the United States. If you say you need a 4-year degree to apply. Not do you have the skills, the competencies, the behaviors, the hustle, the hard work ethic. So in Northeastern also gives you a chance to see folks at a different stage in their careers. Are you hopeful that these folks are going to change the way they think about hiring? Are you seeing employers rethink where and how they hire?
Look, what has happened with respect to education, higher education, is that higher education spent a lot of time focusing on input measures and not on output measures. So for instance, he bragged because that Northeastern has 62,000 applications and we take 2,800 students. If you think about it from this perspective, if you have people who want to have your education, you shouldn't brag about that. Quite the opposite. You should allow people to have the education. Second, which is even more fundamental, is that we assess people when they come. We don't assess people when they leave. Namely, are they ready for the world? Okay, no output measures. That's why you are hearing more and more that we have to look at designing programs that are competency-based, namely assessing at the end of their education or at the end of year up what they know and what they don't know. And so from this point of view, when you look at for instance, Northeastern, Europe, the experiential education, employers like that because they know they have lived with the student for 6 months. They know how she does, they know how she fits, and the student at the same time is doing the same thing. She is looking at it, do I fit here? Is this an environment that is a good employer and good with customers, for instance? So that is something that is shifting. And that's the main driver now. People, the credentialing used to be a signal that the person has that, and employers are saying, wait a second, that's not enough. I need to know whether this person can fit in my environment. And the person at the same time is saying, look, I need to know whether I can fit in this environment. And how do you do it? By testing. And how do you test it? Through these internships. And once again, These internships give the employer the ability to look at you, and you give them the ability, and you give yourself the ability to look at them.
And what's interesting, Zeynep, I want to hear your take on this as well, but the data that supports what Joseph said, 89% of college presidents in surveys said that they're preparing folks to meet the needs of business, and only 11% of CEOs said that college students were actually able to meet their needs. So this isn't a 10% difference, this is a 17-point percentage difference between the view of the sender of talent and the consumer of talent in terms of is someone prepared, which is a remarkable difference in opinion of what's going on.
Yeah, and the view from many executives was, I'm going to find whatever position I need in the future, I'm going to find that talent from outside, and they need to come ready. Right? I don't need to invest in their education. I don't need to invest in their training. But that's slowly changing, I think. And one of the reasons it's changing is that labor markets are tight. And it's a lot more expensive to hire from outside. And organizations are realizing, if I know someone, as you said, Joseph, if I know someone, they've been working for me for 2-3 years, I know they're good with customers, I know they are smart, they're hardworking, I would rather invest in that person, which is more of a certainty, and give them that training than to get somebody from outside who will be a lot more expensive. So I think this is a slow shift, but I see, at least in my world, I don't speak to 3,000 companies, but I talk to retail CEOs and other CEOs all the time. I see that shift slowly happening.
With a caveat. The caveat is the following. And talking to employers, and we faced that even during the recession, when employers had to lay off people, they said, even during this period, we need to bring new blood. You know, and we said, why? Why do you need new blood? Why do you laying off? Because saying this new blood has a different approach. And so I'm not saying they are right, I'm not saying they are wrong, I'm describing what has happened and what's happening. Namely, employers look at their valued employees as an investment, and they also are looking at a pipeline of talent for them that can come because of skills, because of age, because of whatever. So we are in a situation that is not simple. Employers, and frankly, if you look at employers, they don't approach it in the same way. There is nothing called employers. There are people who are starting companies, who are doing it completely differently, where, you know, I am the janitor and I am the CEO at the same time, and I want every employee to be the same thing. You have mid-sized companies who are approaching it completely differently from the large mega companies, you know, and so each one has a different strategy, and it is very interesting to look at what the strategy is, and determine based on that whether we are really, as a person, as a future employee, whether I'm going to be with a good employer who is treating his employees or her employees well and treating his or her customers well.
Yep, and then the bad employers probably have made lots of hiring mistakes.
We all do.
So, but it's more of a case with the bad ones than with the good ones, because they just don't invest in their recruiting, etc. So maybe many of the employees that they have are not good fit. The good employers would say, how do I change the people that I have? Because they already have a good pool of people. One of my favorite examples, again, in the retail space, is a supermarket chain called Mercadona in Spain. They are Spain's largest supermarket chain. They have over 1,500 stores, more than 20 billion euros in sales. And when I visited them in 2010, I think 2009, I went to their distribution center, and this was the most automated distribution center in the supermarket space that I had ever seen. And first I was confused. I'm like, you reinvest in your people, you have a no layoff policy. How is it that you're automating so much? And they said, well, what we found from our workers was that they were hurting their backs. The job inside the distribution centers is not ergonomic. Right now, if you look at it from a financial perspective, it's not paying off to have this. but we never want to ask a man to do what a machine can do. That was the response. The thing is, when they implemented that, at the same time, they started giving training to their warehouse employees, and they did not lose a single one. So those employees are not moving merchandise anymore. They are programming the machines. They're doing lots of other things, and some of them are working at the store. So there are opportunities for companies to do really exciting things that benefit them and their workers.
So let me just take that. So you have institutions, you have employers, you have this thing called the government. So shift a little bit from the employee, the individual, excuse me, to the employer, to what do we need to do systemically? So you're advising the 22 Democratic candidates, right? And they say, Joseph, you know a little bit about this. You care about the future of this planet. What do I need to do from a systemic perspective, whether it's education, the system of higher education, the incentives or not we put in place in government? What are we going to do systemically? Because the MITs and the Northeasterns are great, but they educate, as you said, a very small percentage of the world. What are we really going to need to do to get ahead of this and to not go backwards as opposed to go forwards? What would you advise?
That's a great question. And, you know, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Please.
No,
Zaynep.
No. I'm not shy to speak, but this is not something.
I know this, you're not shy. That's great.
Neither
That's
are you.
Great. Look, first of all, I am optimistic. Despite all the challenges that we face and we will be facing, I'm optimistic. Because if you look at the history of our society, we met the changing conditions and the new needs through education. So for instance, you all know that at some point in our history, we decided that elementary school is important, and we mandated that for everybody. Then society changed, became more complex. We moved from the agricultural to the industrial, and then we said, well, it's not enough. It's not enough. We moved it to junior high, then we moved it to up to the high school. Then we said it's not enough, because we moved from the agricultural, as I mentioned earlier, to the industrial, and we launched all these marvelous land-grant public universities that met the needs. So the question now is, what is the need of our society? We, in this AI world, and we spend a lot of time in talking in society about access. We want to provide access to higher education. First, we want to provide access to education, K through 12, and more or less, we have a system of public education that you can have for free in various cities. We can talk about the quality, but for instance, in Massachusetts, it's high. And people said, now we have to focus on access from high school to college. So every politician, every a president of a university or a college will tell you we need to focus on access. And I'm saying this is remarkable. Even the donors are doing that. Bloomberg gave his alma mater $1 billion, Hopkins, for access along these lines. But if we are going to become obsolete, lifelong learning is essential. The financial aid system that we have in Washington is giving nothing for lifelong learning. Therefore, my advice is focus on providing lifelong learning opportunities. And access has to be a lifelong access. It is not access from high school to college. It's access for each citizen throughout her life. How can you do it? There are many ways. I gave you an example. The example is your lifelong learning account. So you see, when you look at universal basic income, that's a way of saying that people are not able to re-educate themselves. Maybe some will not, but give them the opportunity. Let them reach this conclusion. We think that universal basic income is a panacea. No, the panacea is going to provide opportunities for people to redefine themselves, reinvent themselves through education. That's what I would do. And that's a policy.
So if I had $250,000 in my lifelong learning account, would I spend it all on going to Northeastern, or would you advise me differently?
No, let me tell you, it's a great point because he is going to the question of cost. And what we are seeing now, we have built a network, for instance, of campuses as in the United States, in Canada, and in the UK for lifelong learning. But what we are seeing is that given the fact that the lifelong learning situation is unregulated in some ways, and at the same time is something that is burgeoning, and universities didn't position themselves yet to take full advantage of that, we saw that the prices are going down, the cost is going down. So essentially, and something more, it pushed the universities who started doing that to rethink what they do. Namely, going back to your point, the degree is no longer the destination. As an adult, you need a certificate. That's your first destination. You need to go further, you can stack another certificate. So lifelong learning is pushing us to rethink not only cost, but to rethink delivery, to rethink content, and essentially higher education has not been personalized, and we are moving to a personalized system. It's my need, and I need this now, wherever I am. We don't do that in higher education, and that's the opportunity. But to answer your question, you are running, I think you would be a great president. I really believe that, because he came from the business world and launched an entrepreneurial activity to impact people and make lives better. That's what we need from a politician.
Oh,
so
kind of you.
I would say go for lifelong learning. A policy is there. Put it at front and center, and have each person, for instance, have a lifelong learning account. Other possibilities are there.
Zeynep, I want to hear you answer that similar question. And I would just tell you before you do is you don't hear many college presidents talk in the way that Joseph just did about understanding the fundamental rethinking of what the bread and butter is of the institution. That takes a lot of courage. It's not easy to do, and I appreciate it because we need more college presidents like that. Zeynep.
Lifelong learning, super important. I think if I were to give advice to a politician, I might take a slightly different approach. How many of you here are worried about populism?
Nobody.
Okay, it's on the rise. And I think the reason that populism is on the rise is not because of the... Okay, collectively, you explain populism. I'm not good with explanations.
Wait, he has a PhD in linguistics. He's explaining populism.
That's a great question. And she asked me to answer that, and it's her question?
Yes,
What's
exactly.
That? What's
because
that? That's
it's
not...
short explanation of populism.
No, you have to do it. You have to do it.
I think it's collectively making bad choices. Is that a good description of populism?
I can tell you that the way it's been interpreted, at least recently, it just feels, frankly, like it's the worst of ourselves as a people, and making choices that don't bring out the best in ourselves.
Yep. So collective, but you know what I'm talking about, right? With our current president, what we have right now, and I don't want to, be on either side, but since this is the advice to Democratic candidates, you said, and I think one of the reasons is not because people are fearful of the future, but people are not happy with the now of work. People are not happy with what has happened during the last 40 years. Median wages have been flat, pretty much flat for the last 40 years. The share of the top 1% grew something like, I'm going to look at, doubled between 1980 and 2014, doubled for the top 1%, tripled for the top 0.1%, and pretty much stayed the same for an average American. More than 45 million jobs in the United States are in occupations that pay less than $15 an hour. So we have a big problem in this country. So if I were giving advice to a presidential candidate, I would say, lift up those wages, lift up those jobs, provide opportunities for people to earn their living rather than universal basic income, but get them jobs where they can feel good about the work that they do, they find pride in the work that they do, and they can take care of families. I mean, think about our situation right now. A daycare teacher makes, the median wage for a daycare teacher, $10.71. Right? I have a couple personal care aides. There were over 2 million of them. The median wage was $11 in 2017. Nursing and home health aides, 2.4 million of them. Median wage, $12 an hour. We have a big problem in this country. And I think the present problem of our time is to lift up these low-wage occupations and make them better jobs. And I hope that the candidates will talk about jobs, and making things work a bit better for American workers.
I think Zeynep for president, don't you?
Yeah. Let me take a slightly different view. I think you need to work as the problem.
I said you guys got to disagree a little bit. It won't be any fun. Go ahead.
Let me mention that as what we expect from politicians is to have a perspective for the next 3 to 5 years, and a perspective that goes beyond, namely that prepare a perspective that will prepare the nation for the future. So what you said, who could disagree with that? At the same time, you need to see what is coming. And what is coming is precisely in addition, on a midterm and long term, when the World Bank says that in the emerging countries, 70% of the jobs we know are going to disappear in the next 20 years, that in our advanced economies, up to 50% of the jobs are going to disappear because of automation, etc., then it is important to think about the future and prepare the citizens to be robot-proof and flourish in this future.
Yes, but the best way
let me finish this. So I am agreeing with you, and there is no but. I didn't say a but. I never start my sentence with a but, Zeynep. I'm saying I'm agreeing with you, but also we need to look at the future.
But the best, I'll start with but the best way to prepare for the future is to invest in people now.
It's not either or.
Yes.
That's a short-term mentality that we have.
But you said in the future the skills that are needed are creativity, all these other. So we have to start investing in people so that they have those skills.
We are saying the same thing in that case.
Yes, and then I'll say one more thing. Technologies don't just come to a company and everything is glamorous. I mean, I've seen so many examples where technologies were implemented in a way that just hurt the company so much.
I agree.
Because General Motors in 1980s, some of you are too young for this, they spent $40 to $45 billion on a complete automation of their factory, right? And they did that because they said, well, we have bad processes, we have bad labor relations, and let's choose technology to solve our problems. Technology rarely solves business problems. You need good people, you need great processes to be able to leverage technologies. And those companies that Home Depot recently wasted $1 billion in implementing some technologies in early 2000s. So to be able to adapt, roll out, and leverage technologies, we need motivated and capable workforce. And that's why I say you have to start investing in your people now, because that will prepare you better for the future, and it will solve current problems. And one final thing that I will say, sometimes I get worried about these panels about the future of work, because I don't know how many panels I have been invited. I don't know how many panels you have been part of about the future of work. And it's so important to think about the future, how many jobs might be affected. But I'm afraid that so much focus is on there, and there's so little focus on the current problems that we have, because those are hard to solve, and we're not doing enough job to really identify those problems.
That's
and start
dangerous
solving
thinking.
them.
You are opposing the present and the future. We cannot do that. We have to work on both. And we have to start working on it today.
I'm saying both.
So this is why I am saying I was agreeing with you, but you don't want me to agree with you.
No, I'm agreeing too. I'm just saying we're focusing too much on one, and let's also bring the other one too.
Lifelong learning today.
They're kind of, at times violently agreeing, at times not. I want to hear what you all think in terms of what the audience, either through Slido or we have some microphones that you can use if you have questions. What's on your minds?
Here you have behind you.
Ah, wow, holy smokes. I hope the word populist isn't up there.
Yes, we can Google the populist here.
Well, I mean, I think you're
yes.
here.
So I'm going to start, let me one it from, how do we make lifelong learning more accessible, requiring individual learners to take on debt to keep pace with the job market is clearly unsustainable. So, Zeynep?
She wants me to do
it.
I already answered that in some ways because I said that a lifelong learning account, similar to the health account, is how societies in, for instance, Singapore, in Scandinavian countries have looked at it, and that's an answer they have been providing. So it's a simple answer. You know,
So it says Europe is providing basic skills, providing, I think, lots of skills. Northeastern provides degrees. I would say Europe provides competencies primarily. Northeastern provides college degrees. What pathway exists between the two to move the disadvantaged beyond entry-level jobs?
It's a great question. Do you want to start?
Well, I'd just say Europe has never, our whole aspiration in our 10 years of study on this would tell us we're true, that you need to get into the livable wage job market. And like Zeynep's statistics, where if you're a home health aide, a lot of these jobs, there is no way to get out. I mean, a lot of the folks who come to Europe have said, I've been in minimum wage hell and I can't stay there, right? I need to get out of that and find a career where I can start at a place where I have the ability to feed my belly first with enough time left over to feed my brain, right? But most folks in this country working on $10 an hour have to work 2 40-hour-week jobs in order just to live. And therefore, feeding your brain is literally, you just don't have the time. You're just trying to meet Maslow's hierarchy at its basic level. So our job was to get young people to a place at $40,000 in a career job. And then what our data says is 5 years after Europe's graduation, you will be earning as much as the average college graduate in America, period. That's pretty interesting. With 1 year, we get 1 year of college credit that year up. But 75% of our students continue on with post-secondary, largely through innovative folks like Northeastern, who has a whole program for Europe graduates to continue on at Northeastern, which is brilliant, thanks to Joseph. We have
my
many
colleagues, I don't take the credit, my colleagues, the whole community.
Yeah, leaders enable people to make good decisions.
No.
And then lots of employers are saying, it's okay to have your students start with 1 year of college. We will pay for them to continue. And in fact, at American Express, it's a requirement of the job.
Yeah.
You can't take the job unless you commit to continue to get your degree. We now have lots of folks with their BAs in computer science because American Express supported that journey. And my view is people are not going to have more money in this country, sadly. The government's not going to have more money in this country. It's going to have to be employers thinking differently about partnering with institutions and partnering with human beings, individuals, to create pathways that actually allow them to keep going up. I mean, without that, it's difficult because college is, as I said, out of reach for a lot of people in terms of their financial means.
Yeah, and to give you an example along the same lines, for instance, we work with companies and employers because they want their employees to move into a different world. So, for instance, with GE, they said we need to have our employees move into advanced manufacturing. So what we did with GE, we didn't tell the GE folks, oh, you have to send them to Northeastern. We said Northeastern is going to come to you. So we're delivering these programs there. They are based on the fact that they are working, based on the fact that they have an experience there. And so the question becomes, we devised programs that were tailor-made, customized to their time, to their needs, and we provided that there. And this allowed them to advance and getting better pay, and that's today, not 5 years from now. It's happening, and I can give you many more examples. So universities, when you move into lifelong learning, for instance, have to learn to change the way we operate, their modus operandi. We have to go to the learner wherever the learner is, and we have to provide education and curricula on demand, and it's not the degree that is the destination, is precisely, what competence am I looking for, and can I get it after 6 months or a year, whatever there. So that's what we're talking about. And believe me, after this, we looked at it, their pay becomes much higher. Why? Because they moved into advanced manufacturing, into advanced nano manufacturing, etc. So those are the opportunities we're talking about.
And there are some inexpensive or free opportunities. I just don't know how good they are, given that they don't provide that experiential learning. So MIT has invested a lot in online education. And you can take different courses, create different competencies. I just don't know how well the employers are receiving those.
Well, let me tell you, that's an interesting topic. Very quickly. You have various outfits like Coursera on the West Coast, and you have, also the edX, etc. What has happened is that people realize that it's not enough to put knowledge on the web, because after all, a book is at the same level, a library is the same level. What you need is how you can engage the person. What do I mean by that? If you look at the number of people graduating from those purely online courses, they are not high, they are very low. That has been documented. And therefore the question becomes why? Because we are social beings. We need to interact with others, we need to learn from each other, and we need to be in an experiential setting. That's what you're saying.
That's right.
And that's the beauty of testing and being, for instance, the Coursera situation is morphing. Because now they realize that, and they're coming and saying, can we integrate an experiential component working with you or whatever. So it's fascinating what's happening. Yes?
We do that a lot in executive education. So I teach, as part of an online program in executive education, we have videos and the participants watch the videos, but then there are sessions with us. And you can see the different people, they might be in their homes, but it is more human.
More human, and also when you are embedded in a real environment and solving it and working on it and integrating that as part of your experience, what you do, what we do, that is, the retention is enormous. And we, for instance, we saw the difference. Our retention now is at 90% for those people doing those cases, whereas it's 6%, as you know, for there.
Yeah. So let me, maybe some folks who have questions or use a microphone, didn't have the Slido poll, I'll go to as well.
Hello. Okay. I just wanted to thank you guys for speaking. I wanted to ask a question a bit on UBI, which came up a couple of times. I would just like to ask why it is not seen as some sort of safety net that can allow for people to continue with education. I have higher degrees. I am able to take time off of work to pursue becoming robot-proof. I work in a neighborhood which is very high minority, very low income. People are working multiple jobs with kids and have absolutely no time to pursue further education. So I'm just curious why UBI was seen as people not wanting to work, rather than as an opportunity for people to say, I want to become robot-proof, I want to continue with my education and have the safety net to support myself.
That's a great point, if I may. And
that's a good question.
That's a great point, and the reason is the following. When society is conceived of universal basic income, and Finland is an example, some Scandinavian countries also toyed with that and applied it, and also in Ottawa, in Canada, etc., it became immediately clear that it is not enough to give income to a person. You need to give her also the opportunity and the means to pursue also education. And that's where the notion of a lifelong learning account will allow you to do that too. So it's really, don't focus only on one aspect. That's the conclusion of UBI, but couple the UBI with the lifelong learning. So UBI will allow you to eat And that's necessary. But also, it doesn't give you the opportunity to go and redefine yourself. And so that's where the lifelong learning accounts come into play.
Zeynep, do you want to?
Yeah, that's a great perspective.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the question. And there's something about, at least from my perspective, is I think fundamentally people there's huge dignity in work. I think people want to work hard. I think they want to have a job. I think they want to be challenged. I think they want to learn. And so there's something about providing that. Now, whether you say that's contingent, that's part of getting income, you have to apply yourself in some way, shape, or form, whether or not you put their requirement on. But I think if you just play to people's best instincts, because people want, I think there's great dignity in work. I mean, tremendous dignity. And so how do we help people learn such they can do that? It may be just using different words. You know?
That's exactly why I support UBI, is the sense that I think that it is the support network for people to continue to develop, just as you said. There is the desire to work, there's the desire to grow. Universal basic income.
So the concept of everyone getting, $1,000 a month, period.
Actually, the proposals, there are various proposals worldwide and in the United States for UBI. Some will say, not everyone, say beyond, beyond a certain threshold, you get nothing. You know, so even today, when the politicians are talking about free college, for instance, and they are making a point that free college, unless you make a lot of money, and therefore you shouldn't do that. Because people said, well, obviously, if the very privileged go to see that something is free, they are going to take advantage of it, and they'll go to public colleges and public universities and private ones, and it will displace people who have real needs. So things are getting more refined now. So with respect to that. But let's go back to the point. I think that the point is, in order to redefine yourself, you need, beyond any UBI, you need to have a learning opportunity. And that will allow you to reposition yourself. Let me give you an example that actually is a real example, and we learned it. We worked with the tech industry in Seattle, and they said, we don't have enough of a pipeline for computer science. Can you create a pipeline? So we sat down, we worked together with the idea that people who finished a degree at some point or another, but in economics, in history, in chemistry, in English, and we said to them, why don't you come? We worked with employers. Why don't you come and have the long-term internship, the co-op, for 12, 16, 18 months, those are paid. And during this period, we're going to work with you in order for you to have a degree, a master's degree in computer science. What we didn't know is that suddenly this allowed women who dropped out of the workplace to go back to the workforce, and allowed minorities to go back to the workforce. And now, for instance, the Facebooks and the Gateses, etc., are looking at it as a model. Did we stumble on that? Yes, we stumbled on that, because we worked with the employers based on their needs, but we saw that when you start looking beyond certain parameters, you have unintended consequences that are great. That's an example. We had people who dropped out, or going back to your point, who dropped out completely of the workforce. When they saw this opportunity, and the employers were paying for that through the co-ops, through the internships, they came back. So that's why learning is going to be essential to allow you to go back to the dignity aspect.
Thanks for asking the first question from the audience. Do I have another one?
Yes.
Chris.
Just kidding. Do I need a mic?
I think you're okay.
Okay, good. I grew up, fortunately, my work background started in the 70s. And during the time in the 70s, even the 60s, organizations, companies held it as their responsibility to train. I was trained with Marriott as a manager. For 6 months, I worked every job in the hotel to become an HR manager. I'm also a career coach over 35 years and have seen how the responsibility for training has left organizations. They don't and it really started to shift in the mid-'80s, late '80s. And we were career coaches at Polaroid, where MIT, they had MIT degrees that you could get in the cafeteria at Polaroid, certificates and engineering degrees and certificates right in the cafeteria for any employee that wanted it. And so that sort of lifelong learning was part of Dr. Land's kind of philosophy. But for me, I have seen that as a real disservice that private companies have done over these years. I remember teaching to say, now it's all your responsibility. If you want training, go and get it. Go to the Northeastern and pay for it. And companies just backed off. They don't train. And it's a disservice, and we expect the government to do it. And the companies are just not doing it.
I agree with you, and I think before 1980s, 70s, companies didn't think of themselves as only pursuing shareholder value creation. I think companies used to say, we need to take care of our employees, we need to take care of our customers, and we need to create good value to our shareholders at the same time. But then, unfortunately, this is where the business schools have some to blame, to say, no, the only thing that matters is creating value for the shareholders. And that has taken us to here. So it's not just in training that you're seeing lower investments, you're seeing in so many other ways that employers are investing less in their people.
We all have stock, and we all want our stock to go up.
Yes,
and
yes, I agree. So I think slowly we are coming to the realization that only focusing on the shareholders has not benefited. There are certain problems with it, and we need to change course a little bit. Even I think the wealthy Americans who have recreated value for themselves through this capitalism during the last decades are realizing that we have to do something else. We have to do something else, complement capitalism with better values, so that we go back to not just taking care of the shareholders, but also investing in your people and your customers.
I agree with you. The reality that you described, what I mentioned earlier, is going to be increasing. Why? Because we are seeing, we documented that, we studied that. You have less employers every year providing re-education, retooling, reskilling. Why? As I mentioned, they are looking at the tenure, the average tenure, and saying they stay less than 5 years. And I mentioned that in some extreme cases, like Silicon Valley, less than 2 years. So they are not looking at their employees as a long-term investment. And, that's a mistake. That's what Zeynep made her reputation on, is to say, look at it from a different perspective. So we all agree with you. Yeah. But unfortunately, it's going to increase rather than decrease. That's why you need the opportunity for people who are also in the gig economy, who are self-employed, they don't have employers, to also redefine themselves. And that's why lifelong learning accounts, etc., are needed.
Yep. And there are some pockets of hope as well, right? I don't want to be too pessimistic. There are some employers, especially in the sectors that I look at, that are realizing that actually if you pursue only shareholder wealth maximization, you end up hurting your shareholders in the long term. If you don't take care of your workers, if you don't invest in them, it's okay in the short term, but in the long term, you start losing share. And one example is Walmart, which was the poster child for not treating its workers well. But during the last couple of years, Walmart opened tens of academies all over the United States. and academies where they do only training for their department managers, for their assistant managers, for their store managers. And when you talk to Walmart employees, they said, we've never had this before. Like, we've never had this much investment, and they're just so delighted with that level of investment coming their way. So there are some pockets of hope, but perhaps not enough.
I'd say I'm more hopeful than not.
Yeah.
If you read Jamie Dimon's shareholder letter from a few weeks ago, talk to Randall Stevenson at AT&T, talk to Brian Moynihan at Bank of America, you talk to Ken Chenault at American Express. At least 20 years I've been doing this work, I absolutely have seen CEOs think that you can combine high profits with high morals. And I heard that more over the last 10 years than I did the previous 20. I also think young people today are looking for employers that they can actually feel good about working for. I believe this generation will frankly hold those in power today to a better standard. And we're starting to see this generation actually do that in a way that's productive. But from a CEO perspective, we talk with quite a few and work with quite a few. I'm more hopeful than not. If you look at a 20-year kind of time frame, I've been involved with CEOs in this kind of hiring and how you treat people level. Maybe last question, and then we'll wrap up.
So the last conversation was really around the lifelong learning and looking years ahead at your career. Companies are now starting to get back into the community and getting these skills into the hands of younger and younger and younger, going into high schools and elementary schools. How do you see that trend of businesses and the private sector going into the classroom to sort of groom their talent, so that by the time they are able to work, they already have the skills, the training, the knowledge of that company. What's to keep Google or Microsoft or IBM from opening up their own, quote unquote universities? And
well, Apple has its university, right?
Look, first of all, the first part, you have two different questions. One is about involvement with the schools, employers and others involving themselves with the school. And this is wonderful because essentially our responsibility is to help every citizen become robot-proof from K to gray. And I haven't discussed what we should do as higher education for the K to 12. And I can give you examples, but to answer the first one, that's great. The second thing you raised is different, is what prevents companies from starting their own universities. Actually, as you know, and Zeynep will confirm, many have done that. But then they tell you, this is not our core competence. We are doing it because you guys in higher education are not meeting our needs. If I want to have a T-shirt with Northeastern on it, I'm not going to manufacture that. That's not my core competence. They are doing it because we have failed to meet their needs.
That's exactly right.
You agree?
Yeah.
My God,
absolutely.
we should stop here. We should stop here.
Zeynep, what you
yeah,
add
that's
to that?
exactly right. I mean, I teach at a business school, and sometimes I'm ashamed of what we teach our students because those are not the things that they can take with themselves into the workforce. My students, I teach a course on service operations, and they keep telling me, stop telling us about what best practices are. We know them. Tell us how to implement them. Tell us how to do those. And we're not great in academia. And the reason that companies invest in these things is because it's something that we're not providing. It's shame on us. I think we need to do a much better job.
Zeynep, I'm going to offer you a job because we do experiential education. That's good. Anyway, but I want to thank you for bringing us. That's a different matter. Huh? That's a different. Are you negotiating on her behalf?
Yeah.
What's that?
He's our future president, and he's asking you a very important question.
But I think that I really would like to thank you for bringing us together. As usual, we have a great leader in our community, and I really would like us to recognize him. Thank you.
You're kind. First of all, thank you. So it's always a pleasure. I said both Joseph and Zeynep are friends and very respected colleagues in this field. So I just want to say thank you for your time. Thanks for your insights. always a pleasure. Thanks for leading in ways that really make us better as a country.
It's fun.
The work you do is fantastic. I love it. And I hope that was enjoyable. And thanks so much for being here, and Godspeed on your journeys home tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's your experience to make money. And that's broken down quite a lot. And I think that's quite difficult because there's something quite unsavory, really, about